let's talk about breathing space in images. Now, breathing space is a very specific negative space. It's a type of negative space that I personally call breathing space. So negative space in this image would be, everywhere around the model, right? So this would be all negative space. Breathing space is the space that's in front of the model, all right? So, if the model is facing this way, and it doesn't have to be human, it can be a sci-fi model, I'll show you in a minute. So if the model is facing this way, okay, the breathing space is going to be a space between the front of the model and the edge of the frame, okay, towards which the model is looking, right? So if you're going to go to sci-fi, that's a breathing space. That's the face of the model, back of the model. Smaller gap, larger space, right? So that's a breathing space here, okay? Same here, that's a breathing space. Look, the model is facing this way. It's exiting towards this edge of the frame. You cannot put it too close here to the left because it's going to look claustrophobic. If I showed you on this example, right, that's a beautiful breathing space balanced by a really nice negative space. Very nice offset with the rim light, right? But watch this. What happens if I'm gonna do this, right? Does it make sense to you? This entire space on the left-hand side becomes redundant. There's nothing to be offset by. Also, because there's such a strong focus here and she's looking outside of the frame, you will be literally stuck in this part of the image forever. You will never look at, at this part. So this entire part of the image becomes redundant. Do not do that. That's the correct image, right? You want to leave space, okay? And that goes to any type of, models. Look at that. That's a front, right? Well, that's a breathing space because it's facing this way, okay? And you need to think about breathing space also in terms of interaction between objects in the frame. So when you have two objects in a frame, you also need to leave some space for them to exist. Basically, think about it as a buffer of air. They need to breathe, some kind of a personal space that you don't want to encroach on to sort of cramp the model visually. So if I did something like this, okay, this just wouldn't work. And I see this happening a lot because what most people are doing, right, they trying to find a center of a model, like literally a gravity center of a model, and put it in the center of the frame, regardless of how the model reacts with the edges of the frame and how the negative space is being composed around the object, right? So do not focus on the object, focus on the negative space. The same goes to Chinese calligraphy. So if you look at this work of mine here, calligraphers will never focus on the characters. They will always focus on the negative space, on the white space around the characters, right? And it actually has its own name in Chinese and Japanese. We call it void space, or nothingness space, basically. A white noise, white space, right? Everything around the characters. And it goes to small works with one character and larger works like this. So when I was writing this, I needed to make sure that the negative space that surrounds the characters, right, is very beautifully balanced. And the trick here in calligraphy is that you cannot repeat strokes, right? There's one stroke and you're done. So if you make a mistake somewhere here, well, you're buggered. So you need to imagine or kind of pre-visualize the negative space before you actually put anything on paper. So creating negative space with something in a frame is basically a joke. It's easy, right? Because you have everything in the frame. So imagine how difficult it is to do this, right? When you cannot see characters on the paper, you can't move them, you can't repeat them, you can't correct them. You just write, okay? And every character, most of them is just one stroke, continuous stroke, or two continuous stroke, or three continuous strokes, right? And the paper also, inhales ink very quickly. So if you write too slowly or you hesitate, everything's gonna show in a white space, okay? So this is why I'm very sensitive to negative space and breathing space, because I can feel it. But you can train this, okay, by looking at really good art. You need to really look at good art on ArtStation, follow the best people out there, and try to understand why they placed, consciously look at the image and think why they placed specific object in specific, places, and why light falls on, in this area, why there's a breathing space here, why the negative space here is, smaller than, for example, here, okay? You need to be very conscious about it. And that's how you're going to develop this kind of an instinct, a natural instinct for understanding breathing space and negative space in general, because breathing space is nothing else but basically a very well defined or very specific type of negative space, okay? So I use it a lot in my images and I absolutely love it. I think it creates a very beautiful sort of like a void and helps you to define the shape that you're trying to, record with whichever medium, which is a 3D rendering, painting, photography, it doesn't matter. This rule applies to every single type of visual art out there.